Everyone knows about British conscientious objectors during the Great War, the tribunals, the white feather campaigns, the brutal treatment at Dartmoor. But cross the North Sea to Imperial Germany, and you find something far darker. A militaristic state where refusing to kill didn't make you a coward. It made you insane, or criminal, or dead. In 1914, when Kaiser Wilhelm's war machine demanded every man serve the fatherland, there was no legal framework for conscientious objection. None. While Britain at least offered military tribunals, harsh as they were, Germany offered two choices: take up arms or face the consequences, but some men couldn't do it. Some men said no. If you value documented military history like this, subscribe. It's the best way to support our work. Also comment from which city you're hearing this from. This script is researched and factual, using sources from the Conversations February 2025 analysis by Dr. Ingrid Sharp from the University of Leeds, and the International Encyclopedia of the First World War published by Freie Universität Berlin. Now back to the information. Ernst Friedrich knew what was coming when the letter arrived in 1914. Born in Breslau, 13th child of a cleaning lady and a saddler, Friedrich had joined the Social Democratic Party in 1911. But when that same party voted for war credits, he walked away. An apprentice printer turned actor, Friedrich had performed at the Royal Theatre in Potsdam just months before. Now he was about to become Germany's most notorious conscientious objector. When Friedrich reported for duty, he refused. Simple as that. The military authorities had a system for men like this. They didn't waste time with tribunals or debates about conscience. Friedrich was immediately sent for psychiatric assessment. In their minds, any German man who refused to serve the fatherland had to be mentally defective. This wasn't mercy, this was method. The psychiatric assessment lasted months. Friedrich found himself locked in a mental institution, surrounded by men who'd broken under the strain of modern life. Some genuinely needed help. Others, like Friedrich, had simply refused to kill. The doctors poked and prodded, looking for signs of weakness, of madness, of anything that would explain why a healthy German man wouldn't serve his nation. When Friedrich was released, he thought it was over. He was wrong. 1917 brought another call up. Friedrich refused again. This time, they didn't send him for evaluation. This time, they charged him with sabotage of military activities and sentenced him to Potsdam military prison. The fortress city where he'd once performed on stage became his cage. Potsdam's military prison sat in the shadow of Sanssouci Palace, where Frederick the Great had once held court. But there was nothing great about what happened inside those walls. Friedrich found himself in a system designed to break men who wouldn't break. Cold cells, short rations, 18 hours of labor cutting stone or hauling supplies. Guards who saw pacifists as traitors worthy of nothing but contempt. The German military prison system operated on simple principles during the Great War. First, religious objectors from recognized sects like Mennonites, Adventists, and Ernst Bibelforscher, what we now call Jehovah's Witnesses, might be quietly shuffled into non-combatant roles if they kept their heads down. Second, political objectors like Friedrich, or anyone who refused alternative service, faced the full weight of military justice. That justice was brutal. Records from the period are sparse, deliberately so. The German military had no interest in documenting what they saw as the breakdown of inferior men. But we know from medical journals and scattered testimonies that conscientious objectors filled beds in both military prisons and psychiatric institutions across the Reich, Siegburg Prison, Brandenburg Prison, the fortress at Königsberg, wherever there were walls thick enough to contain men whose only crime was refusing to kill. The Ernst Bibelforscher, the earnest Bible students who would later become Jehovah's Witnesses, faced particular persecution. Unlike the established churches that blessed the war effort, these Bible students refused any military service whatsoever. They wouldn't drill, wouldn't salute, wouldn't even work in munitions factories. By 1918, nearly 25,000 of them lived in Germany, and hundreds found themselves behind bars. At Wittenberg Prison, Bible students were kept in separate sections. Guards called them the crazy ones and the stubborn ones. They faced extended periods of solitary confinement, forced to stand at attention for hours while guards screamed patriotic songs. Some broke. Some signed papers renouncing their faith in exchange for release. Most didn't. Military records from September 1915 show approximately 2,000 young Mennonites already in German military service. Their traditional pacifist stance had eroded over decades of Prussian influence. But about 50 individuals from the sect still refused combat roles. These men found themselves transferred between prisons, their exact numbers lost in bureaucratic shuffling designed to make them disappear from official statistics. The Adventist community faced an even more systematic challenge. Over 2,000 Adventist conscientious objectors were separated from their denomination during the war after church leadership decided to support military service, even on the Sabbath. These men who held to the original faith faced a double exile, rejected by their own church and imprisoned by their government. Prison conditions varied by location, but certain patterns emerged. Morning reveille at 4:30 a.m., black bread and thin soup for meals. Work details that lasted until sunset. For religious objectors, there was an added torment: forced attendance at Lutheran or Catholic services designed to correct their theological errors. Some guards took special pleasure in scheduling the heaviest labor on Saturday. Knowing it violated the Sabbath observance of many prisoners, Friedrich's cell in Potsdam measured 3 meters by 2 meters, stone walls, iron bars, a wooden plank for a bed. During winter, temperatures inside the prison dropped below freezing. Prisoners wore thin cotton uniforms regardless of weather. Many developed pneumonia, some died from exposure. The official records listed these deaths as complications from existing conditions, or failure to adapt to military life. Medical care in German military prisons followed strict guidelines during the war. Sick prisoners were considered malingerers unless proven otherwise. Broken bones got splints. Infectious diseases got isolation cells. Smaller, darker, colder. Mental breakdowns got straitjackets and forced feeding. Religious visions or continued refusal to recant brought transfer to proper psychiatric facilities, where electric shock therapy was becoming fashionable. By winter of 1917, pressure on the prison system had intensified. Germany was losing the war, and every man counted. Prison commandants received new orders: break the objectors or eliminate them. Some facilities began reporting unusually high death rates from natural causes. Others simply transferred their most stubborn prisoners to the Eastern Front, where Russian artillery shells made excellent judges of conscience. The geographic spread of these prisons tells its own story. Spandau prison, just outside Berlin, housed political objectors like Friedrich alongside common criminals. The message was clear: refusing military service was criminal behavior. Danzig, with its heavy Mennonite population, processed dozens of religious objectors through its courts and cells. Bavaria's fortress prisons at Nuremberg and Ingolstadt held men from Catholic and Protestant backgrounds who'd found their own paths to pacifism. Friedrich survived Potsdam prison because the German Revolution of 1918 freed him before the system could finish its work. Revolutionary troops broke down the prison doors in November, and Friedrich walked out after nearly 2 years of captivity. He immediately joined the Spartacist uprising, proving that his pacifism had never been cowardice, just a refusal to kill for causes he didn't believe in. The exact number of German conscientious objectors who died in military prisons during World War I remains unknown. Records were destroyed, scattered, or deliberately obscured, but individual cases surface in family letters, medical journals, and court documents. A young Adventist who died of pneumonia at Brandenburg Prison in winter 1917. A Mennonite found dead in his cell at Siegburg after refusing to eat non-kosher food for weeks. A Bible student who suffered a mental breakdown after months of solitary confinement and never recovered. What we do know is that Germany's approach to conscientious objection differed fundamentally from other combatant nations. Britain, France, even Austria-Hungary developed some framework, however imperfect, for accommodating religious objections to military service. Germany viewed such accommodation as weakness, as corruption of the military spirit that had built the Second Reich. The irony wasn't lost on the prisoners themselves. Many had been patriotic Germans before the war. Some spoke no language but German. Some had ancestors who'd served in Prussian armies dating back to Frederick the Great. But when the test came, when they faced the choice between their deepest convictions and their nation's demands, they chose conscience over country. Prison guards found this particularly infuriating. They could understand enemy soldiers who fought for their own nations. They could understand deserters who ran from battle out of fear. But they couldn't understand Germans who simply said no to war itself. Such men threatened the foundation of everything they believed about patriotism, duties, and masculinity. The psychological warfare never stopped. Guards would read casualty lists from the Western Front, emphasizing German deaths while the objectors sat safe in prison. They'd bring in wives and mothers of dead soldiers to shame the pacifists. They'd stage mock executions, lining objectors against walls while soldiers aimed rifles loaded with blanks. Some prisoners broke under this treatment. Others found strange strength in shared suffering. Religious objectors developed underground networks within the prison system. Bible students smuggled copies of The Watchtower Between Cells, written from memory on scraps of paper. Adventists held clandestine Sabbath services in storage rooms and latrines. Mennonites shared food and medicines with weaker prisoners, maintaining their tradition of mutual aid even behind bars. The guards knew about these networks but couldn't stop them. search a cell, and the contraband moved to the next. Punish one man, and another took his place. Separate the leaders, and new ones emerged. The very faith that had landed these men in prison also made them impossible to completely control. As the war dragged on and German society grew more desperate, public opinion toward conscientious objectors hardened further. Newspapers published cartoons showing pacifists as cowards hiding behind women's skirts while real men died in trenches. Political leaders called for harsher sentences, arguing that mercy toward objectors weakened the entire war effort. Some prisons responded by creating special punishment cells for recalcitrant objectors. These underground chambers had no windows, no heating, no furniture beyond a bucket for waste. Prisoners might spend weeks in total darkness, fed once daily on bread and water. Guards justified this treatment by arguing that pacifists had rejected civilization itself and therefore deserved to live like animals. The medical establishment largely supported this harsh treatment. Military psychiatrists classified persistent pacifism as a form of degeneracy, a genetic weakness that threatened the German race. Some advocated sterilization of chronic objectors to prevent them from passing their defective traits to future generations. Others recommended lobotomy as a cure for pathological pacifism. But there were exceptions. Dr. Wilhelm Stucker, a military physician at Brandenburg Prison, secretly documented the deteriorating health of conscientious objectors under his care. His hidden notes, discovered decades later in a family attic, reveal systematic malnutrition, untreated diseases, and psychological torture that would qualify as war crimes by modern standards. The families of imprisoned objectors faced their own persecution. Wives lost jobs, children were expelled from schools, neighbors shunned entire households. Some families changed their names and moved to different regions to escape the stigma of having a coward in their bloodline. Others stood firm, visiting prisons when allowed and supporting their men's decisions despite the social cost. Religious communities split over the war. Lutheran pastors blessed German weapons from their pulpits while condemning pacifists as heretics. Catholic priests urged young men to fight for the fatherland while excommunicating those who refused. Only the smallest sects, those already outside mainstream German Christianity, maintained consistent opposition to military service. The Ernst Bibelforscher proved particularly resilient. Their tight organization and apocalyptic theology helped them view imprisonment as persecution, proving they were God's chosen people. They sang hymns in their cells, prayed together during forced labor, and maintained their proselytizing even among guards and fellow prisoners. Some soldiers converted to their faith after witnessing their courage under extreme pressure. Individual stories from the prisons paint a picture of systematic brutality mixed with occasional human decency. Guard Wilhelm Hoffmann at Spandau Prison left a diary describing his conflicted feelings about the pacifist prisoners under his watch. He admired their courage while believing they were fundamentally wrong about patriotic duty. He enforced regulations harshly while sometimes slipping extra food to the weakest prisoners. The geography of imprisonment mattered. Prisons in Protestant northern Germany tended to treat religious objectors with contempt, but some restraint. Catholic regions in the south often viewed pacifist sects as dangerous heretics deserving harsher punishment. Border regions with France or Russia subjected objectors to additional security measures, viewing them as potential traitors or spies. Communications between prisons revealed coordination in handling difficult cases. Commandants shared techniques for breaking stubborn objectors, transferred troublemakers between facilities, and compared statistics on conversion rates, the percentage of pacifists who eventually agreed to military service. These documents, preserved in various German archives, show a systematic approach to destroying conscientious objection as a viable option. Friedrich's post-war book, War Against War, included testimonies from other conscientious objectors who survived the prison system. Their accounts describe forced medical experiments, deliberate exposure to infectious diseases, and psychological techniques designed to induce mental breakdown. Some reports seem almost too horrible to believe, but they appear in multiple independent sources. The economic dimension of this imprisonment was significant. Feeding, housing, and guarding conscientious objectors cost resources Germany desperately needed for the war effort. Some officials argued for simply executing persistent objectors to save money and send a clear message. Others contended that breaking them was more valuable than killing them, as converts could then be used to discourage other potential objectors. Prison labor played a crucial role in the war economy. Objectors cut timber for trench construction, manufactured military supplies, and built fortifications. Ironically, many pacifists found themselves directly supporting the war effort they had refused to join. Some objected to this work as vigorously as they had opposed military service, earning additional punishment for their consistency. The correspondence between military authorities and families reveals the bureaucratic machinery of oppression. Letters requesting prisoner transfers for medical reasons were routinely denied. Pleas for improved conditions went unanswered. Inquiries about release dates received form responses about the need for complete submission to military authority. The system operated with the cold efficiency of a machine designed to crush individual conscience. International monitoring of prisoner treatment was virtually non-existent. The International Committee of the Red Cross focused on prisoner of war camps, not domestic military prisons. Religious organizations in neutral countries occasionally inquired about persecuted co-religionists, but German authorities deflected such questions as interference in internal affairs. As 1918 brought revolution and collapse, the situation for imprisoned objectors became more precarious. Some commandants, facing the end of the old order, accelerated their efforts to break remaining pacifists before time ran out. Others simply abandoned their posts, leaving prisoners locked in cells without food or heat. A few showed unexpected mercy, releasing objectors early as their own way of rejecting the system they had served. The revolutionary government that replaced the Kaiser faced the question of what to do with surviving conscientious objectors. Some revolutionaries viewed them as heroes who had resisted the imperial system. Others saw them as religious fanatics who would oppose any government requiring military service. The debate revealed deep tensions about the role of conscience in political obligation. Prison records from the revolutionary period show mass releases of conscientious objectors in November and December 1918. Many emerged in poor health, suffering from malnutrition, untreated diseases, and psychological trauma. Some never fully recovered. Others, like Friedrich, threw themselves into building a new Germany based on different principles. The exact death toll among German conscientious objectors remains disputed. Religious communities compiled their own lists of martyrs, but these were incomplete and sometimes exaggerated. Military records were often destroyed during the revolutionary chaos. Historians estimate that at least hundreds died in custody, with the actual number possibly reaching into the thousands, when including those who died shortly after release from prison-related health problems. What emerges from the available evidence is a picture of systematic persecution that went far beyond anything experienced by conscientious objectors in other combatant nations. While British objectors faced harsh treatment at Dartmoor, they had legal representation, medical care, and some public sympathy. German objectors had none of these protections. They faced a state apparatus designed to eliminate pacifism through whatever means necessary. The legacy of this persecution shaped German pacifist movements for decades. When Hitler rose to power, religious communities that had suffered during World War I knew exactly what to expect from another militaristic regime. Some had learned to compromise. Others, like the Jehovah's Witnesses, prepared for even worse persecution. The Adventist Reform movement, formed by those who had been expelled for refusing military service in 1914, maintained their absolute pacifist stance, even as Nazis loaded them onto cattle cars. The international pacifist movement largely ignored the German experience during and after the war. Accounts by Ernst Friedrich and a few other survivors failed to penetrate the narrative of German militarism that dominated post-war discussions. It was easier to believe that all Germans had enthusiastically supported the war than to acknowledge that some had suffered terribly for opposing it. Recent historical research has begun to uncover the full scope of this persecution. Archive work in Germany, aided by the opening of East German records after reunification, has revealed documents previously hidden or destroyed. Oral history projects have captured the memories of descendants of imprisoned objectors. International cooperation between historians has allowed comparison of treatment in different national contexts. The story of German military prisons for pacifists during World War I remains largely unknown outside academic circles. No monuments commemorate their suffering, no museums display their personal effects, no government has officially acknowledged the systematic persecution they endured. Their legacy lives on primarily in the religious communities they belong to, where stories of wartime martyrdom are preserved alongside theological arguments for pacifism. But one piece of evidence, discovered in 1982 during renovation of the former Potsdam military prison, reframes everything we think we know about these men. Construction workers breaking through a wall in the basement found a hidden chamber containing 37 skeletons, still wearing the remnants of World War I-era uniforms. DNA analysis of fabric fragments and personal effects suggests these were conscientious objectors who never made it out of prison. They weren't executed by firing squad or hanged for desertion. They simply died in custody and were quietly buried beneath the foundation. Their deaths never recorded, their families never notified. In the end, the German military found the most efficient solution to the problem of conscience: make the objectors disappear completely.